Hello everyone, welcome to a video where we get to geek out about art supplies for however long this ends up being. I'm going to be showing you my favorite art supplies, mostly related to painting outside, so plein air art supplies of the last few years. So everything I've collected over a few years that I've still used today, that I love, but keep in mind that I do have several different kits and setups that I use. So what I show you today is what I use most often, but now and then on Instagram or here on YouTube, you'll see me using something else. It's hard to do a video like this when you're someone like me who constantly experiments with different materials and has lots of different setups for different reasons, but I will try to stay focused and show you just my favorite stuff that I wouldn't want to live without as an artist. To give you a little context about who I am as an artist, why I choose the supplies I choose, and how I use them. I am mostly a plein air painter. I paint outside as often as possible, but I do also paint in the studio sometimes. But my primary goal as an artist is to capture the beauty of nature and combine it with my favorite hobby, hiking and biking out in the wilderness. So I like to be more portable. My style is definitely more painterly and impressionistic. And I want to start with the caveat that you don't need all of the supplies I'm going to show you. When I first started, I had very few supplies and I still was able to do what I loved. It's very easy to go down the rabbit hole of feeling like you need certain supplies because you saw someone using it and you really like their style. So maybe if you buy it, you'll be able to do that too. But I think it's much better to slowly collect your supplies over the years, giving yourself a chance to really get to know the supplies before you go out and spend more money on something else. So as you can see, I'm wearing a large backpack, and this is not what I take out with me all the time, but it is my go-to bag for if I'm going on shorter hikes or if I'm driving somewhere and parking and not walking very far. Because this can get pretty heavy when it's all loaded up, I don't love carrying something this heavy for a long period of time. This is actually a photography backpack, and the reason it's amazing is because it has this special pouch, which usually is used for lenses or camera gear. It's kind of like a little drawer. I can pull this whole unit out, but what I do is keep my pochade box or some of my bigger supplies in here that are a little bit heavier. They sit at the bottom of the backpack. And also when I'm done painting, if this got really messy, I can just close it up and know that it's not going to get all over all my other stuff in my backpack. I have a bit of an obsession with backpacks and bags and packing items and things like that. And I have to admit, I'm a bit of a bag collector. Yeah. But I also wanted to show you some of my other favorites for slightly lighter setups. This one can hold quite a bit, but this is what I took with me for most of my journey along the coast so far. If you don't know, I'm doing it's a lifelong goal to walk around or bike around the entire coast of Scotland before I die and paint my way along. And so this one is really lightweight. Ultimate Direction is known for fast packing, and this is more of a runner's bag, so it's really, really lightweight and very breathable. Something like this would be great for a day trip out in the mountains, or maybe if you're going a little bit farther, you can pack your lighter supplies in here and it's not a super big burden on your body. But this one is definitely a nice in-between bag. It still has a support system in the back and is very breathable and has plenty of pockets for water bottles and all sorts of things. This is the 20-liter bag. So you can fit quite a lot of stuff in here. You can pack some rain jackets or whatever you need. Little foam seat. These little foam seats are amazing. They're super lightweight. They're very rugged and they can fit into most bags or most pockets. And they save your butt. When you're outside and you want to sit down and paint, but maybe there's gravel or it's wet, just grab one of these. I will very often pack my art supplies in a little sealable bag because there's many times where I'm outside painting and all of a sudden it rains or something happens and I have to quickly throw everything in a bag and just get out. So when the palette is still wet, if you just toss it in your bag, it can easily spill and get all over your stuff. So this is just a super quick way that you can kind of help keep your bag a little bit cleaner over the years. Let's start with the bigger stuff. We'll go from the bottom of the bag up to the top. This is a tripod, obviously, and it's used for holding up my pochade box. This one is a carbon fiber tripod, meaning it's very, very strong and very, very lightweight. I had many tripods over the years that were very cumbersome and heavy and not super sturdy. And, after a while, I just ended up doing some research and finding one that I knew I could rely on that wouldn't be super, super heavy. So like I said, I usually keep my big heavy stuff in the bottom of the bag. If I'm trying to be a little bit more lightweight and I'm not taking my pochade box, I will sometimes use this bottom section as a cooler bag. Put a little cooler pack with my sandwiches and whatever I'm eating that day in a plastic bag and shove it in here, close it all up, and it actually stays really cold, which is amazing. So I can go for a really long walk along the coast, have lunch while I'm out there painting, and I just love that. One thing I am totally in love with is this pochade box. So I would say at least half the time I'm taking this with me. This is the Yugo plein air box, the 6x8 size. They have a few different sizes, but no matter what kind of pochade box you get, if you're using something that attaches to a tripod, my biggest advice is to buy one of these tripod shoe mounts and keep it on your pochade box, keep it on the camera or whatever it is. Buy one of these for every device you could possibly need, because I can't tell you the amount of times that I have gone out somewhere, brought the tripod, took out the box, and this is missing. And then there's no way to attach it. So it's like you brought all that stuff for nothing. They're cheap, you can get them online, just buy some extra and just keep them installed. Once you attach it, it's pretty straightforward. You just open it up, and this uses tension hinges, meaning you can press and hold. It doesn't buckle under its own weight. So you can pretty much angle it any position you want. And obviously the tripod head can adjust as well if you want to tilt it down towards yourself. This is a pretty expensive pochade box, so I was a little hesitant to buy it. But after watching a couple videos and just seeing some reviews about it, I went for it, and I am so happy. And I waited to make this video because I wanted to be able to talk about some of my supplies, especially this one, more thoroughly after using it for a long time. So a couple reasons I absolutely love it is that the tension hinges are very strong, the materials are pretty strong and robust, it's magnetic, and it has a removable mixing tray. So you can either buy their mixing trays and they have different colors, or you can make your own. You can buy glass and cut it to fit. Like, you could pretty much customize it however you want. I like the magnetic thing because it's just so quick and easy. You're not unscrewing things to take it apart and change things. It also comes with different accessories like the side trays. And because it's magnetic, it's that fast, it's that easy. The design is pretty cool, actually. Just clips on, but it's held in place by some magnets. And if you press on it, it's actually really strong. I wouldn't put all your weight on it, obviously, but it holds brushes. You can pretty much put anything you need on there. For my kind of hiking lightweight setup, I like this size because I'm not really painting large, and I use very small painting kits. This is a collapsible water cup, and they probably have different versions of these online nowadays. I got this one so many years ago, I don't remember. And this is just a drawing board clip, and you just slide that on, and then you can put it on any side you want, but it just fits right over that, and then you can paint without worrying about your water being up here and spilling. And I'll insert a clip of me using this outside so you can kind of see the typical setup that I use. But yeah, I have just been so happy with this, and really, really glad I invested in myself. Because it's so easy to set up and take apart. If I am caught in a sudden thunderstorm, I love that I can just take all my supplies off, take the handles off, fold it down, and shove the sketchbooks in my bag and just get out quick. I live in Scotland. It happens more than you think. Okay, we are moving on up to the upper section of the backpack, and this is where the main chunk of art supplies live. Chunk of art supplies? Herd of art supplies. Posse of art supplies. Gaggle of sketchbooks. Wow, okay. So the supplies in this section do change now and then. I'm always experimenting with different sketchbooks and supplies and seeing what suits me. I usually try to give art supplies a good solid few months out in the field to see if I like it, or if it's a sketchbook, I'm using it inside and outside. But I keep specific painting kits in here or in my other bags, just so it's always ready to go. Sometimes I call it my plein air go bag, meaning it's by the door, it's ready to go. I don't have to worry about if I forgot something when I'm out there. Although somehow I still sometimes randomly forget like a paintbrush. How does that happen? Speaking of paintbrushes, let's start there. In the back of the bag, I have my brush kit. I've tried a few different versions of brush holders like this. The Jackson's Art one has like a fold down section, but I don't like that one because I want my brushes to be supported in a rigid structure like this. I don't want there to be any folds or bends in it. So this one I found is so far is my favorite. And it holds big brushes too. I do sometimes use travel watercolor brushes, especially in my smaller kits, which I will show you after. More often than not, if I'm not hiking a huge distance and I'm able to just put whatever I want in my backpack, this is what I bring, and I have a full set of brushes in here. These are my brushes that I made with Craft Almo. I have a whole set available, and I also have a few other brushes. Silver, Black Velvet have always been my favorite watercolor brushes, and I got these many years ago, and they've still lasted till today. A toothbrush is also great for splattering paint and just getting cool effects. So now and then some of these will change, but I always try to have at least a full set. Again, that's why I love this large, rigid brush holder, because I don't have to worry about my brushes getting cracked or ruined or, shoved down into the bag or forgetting them outside. I think I've tried every 100% cotton sketchbook on the market by now, unless it's like a handmade thing. And there are a few that I gravitate towards because my style, I would say, is very loose. I like to do lots of watery washes and then layer up my paint. If I'm using gouache, it doesn't matter quite as much, but I'd rather have a sketchbook that's versatile that I can use with any medium, especially watercolor. So that said, I have been loving the Hahnemühle 100% cotton sketchbooks. I really like this large square format because I can do a full spread and I have lots of room to play. Or I can just do little tiny sketches and kind of plop them down wherever I want on the pages. And there's enough room to play. I think that room to play on the page is really important for me, especially if I'm drawing, if I'm using ink, if I'm doing architecture. So anyway, when I'm painting outside, I'm not a massive fan of the hardcover because I do like to fold my sketchbooks and make them smaller if I can, unless I am doing a full spread like this. So I tend to lean towards the soft cover sketchbooks, but this one is just so versatile. I really love how the paper works. I can use pretty much anything in this one. So it's kind of my go-to sketchbook when I'm like, yeah, I want to play today. I don't really know exactly what I'm going to do, especially if I'm going to do anything with watercolor. I also like the fact that the paper isn't too textured, so I can still use ink and kind of like get fine lines, and it doesn't feel like my pen is scratching as much. My all-time favorite sketchbooks, especially for painting outside, are the Strathmore watercolor travel sketchbooks, but these are discontinued. And I do have a small stack of these that I can use that either I bought it when I realized they were discontinued or a couple people have sent to me over the years, which has been wonderful. I especially love the big version. It's 7 by 10 inches, but obviously when you open it up, you get a nice big spread. I just love this paper so much. And yeah, I know it's just like basically a bunch of pieces of watercolor paper stitched together, and I could do that with other watercolor papers I love. I want to spend my time doing other things. My favorite gouache sketchbook is definitely the Stillman and Byrne Nova series beige sketchbook. It's got this beautiful warm tone tan paper, and I love how gouache behaves on this. The paper is not too thick, very smooth, and it just handles gouache beautifully. I also love to draw on this with ink and then use like a white Posca pen to get highlights. It's just such a fun sketchbook. And again, the whole being able to fold it back on itself and have a nice small setup. So if I'm just out here I have everything on my lap or next to me, I can just hold it in my hand and sketch, and it's not overly cumbersome. I also have a larger version of this one, which I use inside and outside, but this little size is a great option for painting outside. Lastly, we have this one, which has become one of my favorites over the years. It's a hot pressed watercolor sketchbook, and I pretty much only use gouache in here, except I will sometimes also draw or use marker. But I don't love how watercolor behaves. This is watercolor. It's, I guess I'm just not a hot press person with watercolor. For gouache, I absolutely love it. It's really smooth. It handles a lot of water really well. And the cool thing about this one is that the pages are perforated. I kind of look at this one as like my postcard sketchbook, so I'm not necessarily filling all the pages front and back. I just paint on one side just in case I want to tear that out and give it to someone later. I also have a large version of this that I keep inside, but I like this small size, I think it's A5, for painting outside because obviously it's a little bit easier to take places and just keep on my lap. Okay, now what about drawing and painting supplies? Are you ready to geek out with me? This is my favorite little carrying case for all of my drawing utensils. Pens, pencils, whatever. I like this one because it has a sturdy bottom and top, so it doesn't like collapse on itself. And on the inside, we have a little flap here that I can attach my fountain pens to kind of keep them separated from everything else in there. It also has a little zipper pouch where I keep little rulers. So I have my fountain pens mostly there, although I have more than I need, so there's a couple more inside. But inside, it's really big, so I can fit full-size Tombow dual brush pens, which I love, and I can fit any size pencil. I also keep my white Posca pen, which I mentioned I like to use on the beige paper, but I also sometimes use that like on top of watercolor or gouache, chapstick. And then any other extra pens that I feel like trying or playing with. I would say that right now I'm definitely in a fountain pen phase, so the Pilot Parallel pens are still some of my favorites. They are so much fun. I have a whole other video about that if you haven't seen it. My Lamy Safari is probably my oldest fountain pen, and it's just a classic. I love it. And this one is a red case, so I put red ink inside it to remind myself it's different. I have two Sailor 55-degree nib pens. There's different green inks in each of them. If the case of a pen is a certain color, like this is green, I tend to use green ink in it. Because I have so many, that means I always know what ink is in what pen. And I'm always playing with different shades of colors of inks, so this just helps me keep it a little bit more organized. And my newest pen, which is one of my favorites already, is the Tornado Retro 1951. The reason I got this is because it uses the number 6 Jowo nibs, so you can actually just replace this top nib with a bunch of other styles. So this is a calligraphy stub nib kind of thing. It creates a really beautiful thick line, or I can switch it out for the extra fine nib that it came with. And I have a bunch of other nibs on my wish list that I will probably eventually get. And who knows, maybe even someday I'll end up with one of those gold nibs. Don't tell Wolfie. So I am definitely in kind of an experimental phase with my fountain pens, trying different inks, trying different nibs, and I am absolutely loving it. I'm especially using them when I do architectural sketches and playing with lots of splashy color. It's just a really fun combination, which I mostly do in the Hanamulla sketchbook because I love how the ink flows on that paper. With pencils, I kind of fluctuate between mechanical pencils because they're just really easy and robust and cheap, and the Blackwing Pearl. These obviously need a sharpener, and I do have a couple portable sharpeners, but for some reason, I am terrible for losing my sharpeners. I even had a pencil sharpener that attaches to my car key ring, and somehow I lost it. Like, I don't understand. I'm just cursed with sharpeners. So I love this pencil so much, and I pretty much only use this one when I'm in the studio now. But when I'm outside, I have a couple different mechanical pencils that are just like the cheap kind you can buy it. stationery stores, and I typically use those. I mentioned the Tombow dual brush pens. One side is a brush, one side is a small fine detail nib, and they're great for doing value sketches, just really quick. They are water-based, so I guess you could technically get it wet and like move it around with a brush, but I just draw with them. And I can also use the lighter gray as my initial sketch before I do watercolor or gouache. So I always have a set of the grayscale in my case. I find the brush nib really fun to play with. And now for what many of you have been waiting for, paint. And this is one of those topics that I struggle to film or talk about as like what's my favorite, because I do change my brands and I change my setups a lot just to try different things and also to keep things interesting. The one kind of common denominator in my kits is that I am obsessed with portable painters. That's what this thing is. Basically, it's a all-in-one kit. You open it up, the case becomes the little stand here, but also the water dipping cups. And then you open it up and you have your palette and your mixing trays. So it is one of those just super convenient designs that I fell in love with a long time ago, and I still love it. I have used watercolor in these. I've used gouache. This one is my gouache palette. I call it my dried gouache palette, and I think I've done 2 or 3 videos about it by now. Plus, I did the entire month of Plein April painting outside every day with this 2 years in a row. I'm always trying different colors, trying different brands. All of the brands that I use in my dried palette are considered professional line gouaches, so they don't really flake or get like super crumbly. As soon as I'm done painting, I close it up and I keep the lids on it. I keep this all sealed up in my backpack. And so it actually never dries long enough for it to get completely crumbly. I paint a couple times a week. Sometimes I'll go 2 weeks maybe and only paint once, and even then it doesn't get crumbly. So the professional gouache definitely helps with that. And I kind of use a combination of many brands. So the main brands I use are Winsor Newton Designer Gouache. I use the Shinhan Gouache. I use Daniel Smith. I think only like 2 or 3 colors, Daniel Smith. I use a couple M-gram colors, and I use the Schmincke Horadam colors. But I am definitely leaning more towards the more affordable options that I can get here, which are the Shinhan and the Winsor Newton, because I go through it so quickly, and the other brands are just way too expensive in Scotland. I have 5 blues in here right now, and that's mainly because I was trying different color combinations for specific subjects, like going out and painting a wave with this blue versus this blue versus this blue kind of thing, just to study. But yeah, it just kind of always changes. I do try to keep an updated list of what's in here on my supply list. So if you're ever wondering what the latest I'm using is, go check that out. This gouache palette pretty much lives in my backpack, and especially if I'm using my pochade box, I just take this out, set it up, put it on the pochade box, and I love that setup, that combination. I also have a watercolor version of this, but that one is usually in one of my other backpacks, which I'll show you a smaller kit that I'll just toss in my car and go somewhere and paint. But yeah, this one is my go-to planner kit when I'm going out to study, especially with this bigger bag with my pochade box. Other accessories that I keep in my backpack at all time are a little spray bottle, tape, a paper towel or a sponge. And this is my latest thing. I made these a few months ago. I usually keep a viewfinder in my bag. This one I made myself. It's kind of like a little kit. And I did a Patreon video about how I do this and how I use it, but basically it just has different size windows. Some of them have a grid, and I can look through it and find my composition. And then it has one which is red, which reduces everything to sort of grayscale, or not grayscale, but like monotone. So you reduce the confusion of color and what you're seeing. And then I just punch some holes out of some cardstock so I can look through and pinpoint a specific color. So little tools like this are just great for going out and studying, and I don't always use it, but it does really help, especially when I'm studying a new subject. And that is it for this big bag. Oh, So I am going to set this aside and show you my little travel kit, as I call it, or pocket kit. This little cutie is my travel kit. I have a couple different small bags that I circulate through, but this one is my current favorite. I got this at a cute little boutique when I was doing part of my coastal journey. Anyways, I will typically take something like this with me if I know I will have less time to paint, or if I'm going out to lunch and I just want to stop at the harbor and do like one boat sketch or something like that. So days where I want to go out and paint, but I don't want to bring everything and do like a full 2 or 3 hour setup and study session. The bag itself doesn't matter as much as what's inside. So let's dive in. So I love my portable painter, but I also have a couple different metal palettes like this. They are the standard palettes that have kind of like a deep tray on one side and a mixing space on the other side. And I call these my experiment palettes because I change the colors a lot and like frequently. So I have my core set of Daniel Smith colors that I absolutely love. But instead of taking all of those colors outside with me, I like to use a more limited palette, and I like to change up the combinations that I use. I don't know when I made this like mental switch, but I started to realize that I much prefer full pans with watercolor. So I'm not like constantly digging into the small pans of color with my watercolor brushes, especially when I'm using the more granulating colors that can dry a little bit harder. So I spray this whole thing with water, let it sink in for like 5 minutes, and then I can just roll my brush in it and get a really heavy amount of color, which is amazing for those first washes on the page. So I've been really enjoying the full pans. And again, because it's metal and I have magnets on the back of all of my pans, I can easily change them out. I can try different color combinations really easily. And I usually have at least 2 or 3 of these with different color combinations in them. And in particular, when I'm experimenting with granulating colors, right now I'm obsessed with the Jackman's watercolors. The granulating colors they make are so incredibly gorgeous, and they pair really well with my Daniel Smith colors. Up until now, for the granulating colors in my palette, I've been using the Primatex, which are great, but expensive, and the Schmincke super granulating colors, which are also very expensive. I have like my core colors that I absolutely love, and I have a whole other video about that if you want to watch it. These little experiment palettes are fun because I get bored really easily if I do the same exact thing all the time. And these make me feel like, oh, I'm trying something new, or it just makes it a little more exciting. So I either have my portable painter or one of these in this bag at all times. I have my typical little accessories like the spray bottle. I usually carry a tube of white gouache just in case, because you can actually combine watercolor with white gouache and create gouache in a way. Or I will just use it as like little highlights or like the masts on a boat or something like that. So it just comes in handy. A paper towel or a sponge is usually always in there as well. That's another thing I forget all the time. So a lot of my trousers and shirts actually have stains on them because I end up using my clothes because I don't have a towel. And in my smaller kit, I typically use travel watercolor brushes. My current favorite travel watercolor brush is the Pro Art Midas Touch Flat. It's a pretty big flat for a travel brush. And I also have a Rose Art & Co. flat brush. It's a lot smaller. And I'm also in the process of prototyping my own travel brushes that I'm making with Craftamo. We'll see. These are very early days. I can't tell you any details about them yet, but obviously I will share that as it unfolds in the future. I do also have a pocket version of my plein air kit, and I call it my ultralight kit or my pocket kit. I have a whole other video about that and a blog post which shows you all the details, all the supplies, but it's like my portable painter micro with like one little travel water brush and a pencil. It's super, super minimal, which I think is good for if I'm just going on a hike or a walk and I don't want to carry anything that can fit in my pocket. And sometimes I just am on the trail and inspiration strikes and I'm like, oh, I have to paint that so I can just do a little sketch. And like the small Stillman and Burns sketchbooks are great for that because they fit in your pocket. I know some of you are like, Sarah, what about your Etcher Slate Mini and like all of that stuff? But I kind of consider those separate. Those are their own kits. I've done other videos about those. You can go check those out if you're interested. I feel like most people just use like a backpack, toss some supplies in, and they go out and paint. So, you know, this is what I do at least half the time. The other half of the time, I am either using my pocket kit or my etcher bags. And yeah, I just change it up. I keep it interesting. And because I have so many different kits, I have a lot of versions of my favorite supplies. So I have a few different versions of my favorite brushes, a few different portable painters or little palettes, and I keep one in each bag that I like to use. Or I keep one in the car in the boot or in the glove box or something. So I pretty much always have a kit ready to go. So it makes painting outside a lot easier. I find that with plein air, the best thing you can do for yourself is just to have your supplies ready to go at all times, whether that's just in your car or in a backpack by the door. Make it as easy as possible so you can't talk yourself out of it at the last second. Okay, I'm gonna go edit this video, and if I forgot something, I will be back tomorrow with an update. Otherwise, hopefully that's everything. If you have any questions, of course, let me know in the comments, and make sure to check the supplies link more regularly to see if I've added anything or see my latest colors, because I try to keep that updated because I get so many questions. And yeah, it's just easier to do that. So I think that's everything. And remember that it's not the supplies that make the artist, it's the artist that makes the artist. It's your brain, it's, you know, or whatever, some other inspirational thing. Okay, bye, have fun painting. Hi, little boy. Oh, thank you for visiting Mommy during her video. Awesome, now I'm covered in cat hair.